Everyone keeps pointing at Shedeur Sanders and saying the same thing. He didn't do enough. But what if that's not the real story? Because when you slow the tape down, something feels off. Not just one bad throw, not one missed read, but moment after moment where things around him quietly fall apart. And that's where the conversation gets uncomfortable. Fans aren't just frustrated anymore, they're suspicious. Suspicious about play design, suspicious about protection, suspicious about why pressure keeps coming clean, untouched, like it was invited, and suspicious about why every mistake seems to land on one name, while others somehow disappear from the blame. There's been a lot of buzz online, with people claiming this isn't just poor execution, it's a pattern. A pattern that started long before this game and keeps repeating itself in the worst moments possible. And the louder the criticism of Sanders gets, the quieter the questions about everyone else become. Because here's the part no one can agree on. Was this just another rough performance? Or was he put in positions where failure was almost guaranteed? Some analysts say the numbers don't tell the real story. Others argue the eye test tells you everything you need to know. And buried between those two sides is footage that's fueling accusations no one wants to say out loud. And once you see what fans are reacting to, you'll understand why this debate isn't going away anytime soon. Because what happened next changed the entire narrative and exposed far more than just a stat line. The frustration didn't start on game day. It started much earlier, quietly, when decisions were being made behind the scenes that most fans never saw. Reports and fan chatter suggest Shedeur Sanders wasn't exactly being brought along like a future centerpiece. Instead of getting consistent reps with the main unit, there were moments during camp that raised eyebrows, limited opportunities, split attention, and situations where he wasn't even working with the same personnel he'd be expected to lead on Sundays. On the surface, it looked like routine depth chart management. But over time, people started asking why a quarterback being evaluated under pressure wasn't being given the same developmental runway as others. And once those questions started, they didn't stop. That's where Kevin Stefanski entered the conversation. Critics have long accused him of being rigid when it comes to quarterbacks, favoring structure over flexibility, system over improvisation. Some fans believe Sanders was never fully allowed to play his game, instead being squeezed into a framework that didn't match his strengths. Again, none of this is confirmed sabotage, but patterns matter, and when preparation feels disconnected, it shows up when the lights are brightest. Because confidence doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes when timing feels off, chemistry never fully forms, and mistakes pile up without context. And that made what happened next far more explosive. Because once the game began, the issues weren't subtle anymore. And that's when everyone's attention snapped to one single play that changed the entire tone of the debate. The moment everything exploded didn't take long to surface. It came on a single play that fans replayed over and over, not because it was complicated, but because it was disturbingly simple. Fourth down, short yardage, the kind of moment where effort alone can change the outcome. The ball was snapped and Shedeur Sanders did what quarterbacks are taught to do. He trusted the protection. He stepped into the pocket, and within a heartbeat that trust collapsed. Pressure came through untouched. Not chipped, not redirected, just clean straight through. And what made it worse wasn't the sack, it was how easily it happened. Fans immediately zoomed in on the offensive line, especially Cam Robinson, and what they thought they saw sent social media into a frenzy. To a lot of viewers, it didn't look like a loss. It looked like a non-attempt. A defender barely had to fight through contact. No anchor, no urgency, no recovery. Just a brief moment of contact and the play was over. That's when the word sabotage started trending, not because it was proven, but because fans couldn't explain it any other way. People asked how a 300-pound lineman in a do-or-die situation could be moved so easily. Others slowed the clip down frame by frame, pointing out missed hand placement, slow reactions, and a complete lack of finish. Now, to be clear, football is chaotic. One bad snap doesn't mean intent, but this wasn't happening in isolation. It was the timing that made it explosive. Fourth down, momentum already fragile, and a quarterback who had been fighting pressure all night suddenly left with no chance at all. What fueled the outrage even more was how fast the blame shifted. Within minutes, the narrative wasn't about protection. It was about Sanders holding the ball too long or not sensing pressure. Fans pushed back hard, saying there was nothing to sense because the breakdown happened instantly. And once that idea took hold, people started looking backward, connecting dots. Other plays, other moments, other snaps where pressure came clean. And suddenly, this wasn't just about one failed block. It was about a pattern that people felt they'd been ignoring. That single play didn't just kill a drive. It changed the entire conversation. Because once fans believed they were seeing effort issues on tape, every snap after that came under scrutiny. And what they noticed next only made the accusations louder. Once emotions cooled, the conversation shifted from outrage to something more uncomfortable. Was this just bad blocking, or was there something deeper going on? Because missed assignments happen every Sunday. Even elite linemen get beat. But what fans couldn't shake was how consistent the breakdowns felt and how rarely they seemed accidental. On replay, some plays didn't look chaotic at all. They looked clean, too clean. That's why Cam Robinson became the center of the storm. Critics pointed out moments where his hands never fully engaged, his base never settled, and his reaction came a split second too late. The kind of details casual viewers usually miss, but linemen don't. Former players online started chiming in, saying it looked less like getting overpowered and more like losing the rep before it even began. Now, to be fair, intent can't be proven from a clip, and no one has confirmed anything malicious. But fans weren't accusing, they were questioning, asking why the same issues kept happening in high-leverage moments, asking why pressure came clean on crucial downs, yet disappeared in low-stakes situations. And that's where suspicion grows. Because effort is hard to measure, but patterns aren't. When a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders is forced to speed up his internal clock every snap, it changes everything. Reads get rushed. Footwork shortens, mechanics suffer. And then, when the play breaks down, the quarterback becomes the headline. What really fueled the debate was how fast the narrative locked in. Almost immediately, commentary shifted toward Sanders needing to adjust, feel pressure better, or make quicker decisions. Fans pushed back, saying adjustments only matter when protection exists long enough to make them. That's when older clips resurfaced. Missed chips, late help, free rushers, nothing blatant on its own, but together enough to make people uneasy. And once that door opened, fans started asking questions no team ever wants circulating. Not about talent, not about development, but about commitment, about whether everyone on the field was pulling in the same direction. Because when trust breaks down in football, it doesn't explode all at once. It cracks quietly until one play makes everyone notice. And what happened next forced people to look beyond effort entirely and straight into the numbers that were being used to judge Sanders in the first place. Once the emotion settled, the conversation took a sharp turn toward the box score. Completions, yards, turnovers, the same numbers that always end debates before they really begin. And for critics, those numbers became the final word on Shedeur Sanders. But that's where things started to fall apart. Because when analysts actually broke down the tape, a different story started to emerge. Sanders wasn't panicking. He wasn't spraying throws. In fact, early on, he looked composed. Calm feet, clean mechanics, quick decisions. He was taking exactly what the defense gave him, even when it meant settling for short gains instead of forcing hero plays. And that matters especially against a defense like the Buffalo Bills, a unit known for disguising coverage and baiting young quarterbacks into mistakes. Sanders didn't bite. He checked down when needed. He moved the chains. He stayed patient. What really caught analysts' attention was how similar some of his throws looked to plays made by elite quarterbacks. One pass in particular sparked debate when it resulted in a turnover. Critics blamed placement, but defenders of Sanders pointed out something uncomfortable. Josh Allen threw nearly the same ball in the same game, slightly behind his target. The difference? His receiver adjusted and secured it. Same throw, same risk, different result. That's when the eye test started winning people over. Sanders showed poise under constant pressure. He maneuvered inside collapsing pockets. He extended plays with his legs when protection failed. Not flashy, just functional, efficient, controlled. And yet, the stat line didn't reward him for any of it. That disconnect became the real issue, because numbers don't show how fast pressure arrived. They don't show free rushers. They don't show receivers failing to separate or timing routes breaking down. They only show outcomes, and outcomes are easy to weaponize. So while critics leaned on the box score, others argued Sanders played better than the narrative suggested. Not perfect, not elite, but far from the disaster some made it out to be. And once that argument took hold, it forced a bigger question into the spotlight. If the quarterback wasn't the clear problem, then who was? And that question led directly to the moment that split opinions even further. A single play that turned into the most debated sequence of the night. The play everyone kept circling wasn't loud. No massive collision. No obvious mistake at first glance. Just a pass that ended up in the wrong hands and instantly became the centerpiece of the entire argument. The interception. Critics wasted no time. They called it late. They called it behind the receiver. And for them, that was enough to close the case on Shedeur Sanders. One bad outcome, stamped and sealed as proof. But the deeper the replay went, the messier the conclusion became. The ball wasn't wildly off target. It wasn't floated. It wasn't reckless. It arrived with pace, slightly behind the receiver, the kind of throw quarterbacks make when pressure is closing in and timing is collapsing. And here's the part that reignited everything. The receiver got both hands on it. That's when the football purists spoke up. If it touches your hands, you're taught to catch it. That rule doesn't change in youth leagues, college, or the pros. And defenders of Sanders pointed out that the receiver appeared to turn upfield before securing the ball. A split second of anticipation, and the ball popped loose. Wrong place, wrong time. What made this play impossible to settle was context. Just one snap later, a nearly identical throw happened on the other side of the field. Slightly behind, tight window, and it was caught cleanly. No controversy, no debate. Same concept, same risk, different result. Now suddenly, the question was it a bad throw? It became, why does the blame stop at the quarterback? Some analysts admitted Sanders could have placed it better. That part wasn't denied. But they also acknowledged the circumstances. Shrinking pockets, disrupted timing, and a receiver who had a real chance to bail the play out. And that's where the split hardened. One side said quarterbacks get paid to be perfect. The other said football is still a team sport. What made this interception linger was how it erased everything that came before it. The poise, the movement, the smart decisions, all reduced to one clip looping endlessly on social media. And once that happened, attention shifted again, not to throws or reads, but to the people who were supposed to make those moments easier. Because when mistakes happen in isolation, they fade. But when they happen inside a bigger pattern, they start pointing somewhere else entirely. And that's when fans started asking an even tougher question. Where were the playmakers when it mattered most? As the debate raged on about throws and protection, another question kept surfacing quietly, then louder with every replay. Where were the playmakers? Because quarterbacks don't operate in a vacuum. They rely on separation, timing, and trust, and on this night, those elements felt missing. Target distribution told part of the story, but the tape told the rest. Routes stalled. Windows never fully opened, and when they did, they closed almost instantly. That's why attention shifted to Jerry Jeudy, a receiver expected to lead the group, to be the safety valve when things break down. Instead, fans struggled to even remember his impact. Few targets, fewer moments, and almost no plays where he clearly imposed himself on the defense. Social media didn't hold back. Some asked if he was being schemed out, others questioned effort, and a harsher group brought up an old narrative, hands, not as an insult but as a pattern that's followed him for years. Again, nothing confirmed, just resurfaced frustration. Meanwhile, one name kept popping up for the opposite reason. Harrison Bryant quietly did his job. He fought through traffic. He caught contested balls. He gave Sanders somewhere to go when the outside routes vanished. No noise, just production. That contrast made the silence from the wide receiver room feel even louder. Because when a quarterback is under constant pressure, receivers have to adjust, come back to the ball, win early, create space when the play breaks down. Those things didn't happen consistently. And when they didn't, Sanders was forced to either check down or scramble, choices that rarely impress on a stat sheet. What frustrated fans most was how quickly responsibility narrowed. Mistakes by receivers faded into the background, while every incomplete pass became another mark against the quarterback. The conversation stayed lopsided. And that imbalance fed the larger theory taking shape online, that Sanders was being evaluated without context, judged as if the offense around him was functioning normally when it clearly was. Because development isn't just about arm talent, it's about support, timing, trust. And when those things disappear, even good decisions can look bad. By this point, the criticism had stopped being about one game. It became about structure, about priorities, about whether this roster was even built to fairly evaluate a young quarterback at all. And that realization led straight into the most uncomfortable question yet. What does this mean for the team's future? At some point, the argument stopped being about one quarterback and turned into something much bigger. Because if Shedeur Sanders wasn't the clear reason things broke down, then what exactly was the team evaluating? That question hit hard when fans started looking at the roster as a whole. The offensive line has been inconsistent all season. Pressure arrives early, pockets collapse fast, and protection on critical downs feels unreliable. That's not just a bad night, that's a foundational issue. And when the foundation is cracked, it distorts everything built on top of it. Then there's the skill position imbalance. Outside weapons struggle to separate, forcing reliance on tight ends and checkdowns. That's not inherently bad football, but it limits what a quarterback can show. Big throws disappear, rhythm fades, and suddenly, evaluations are being made off survival instead of execution. That's why draft talk started creeping into the discussion almost immediately. The team holds valuable early picks, and some fans floated the idea of chasing another quarterback. But that idea was met with immediate backlash. Critics asked how any quarterback, rookie or veteran, would succeed behind the same protection and within the same structure. You don't fix instability by changing the face of it. You fix it by fixing what's underneath. Others pointed out the risk of misreading development. Young quarterbacks need time, consistency, and functional support to grow. Without that, mistakes look bigger, progress looks slower, and confidence erodes faster than it should. And that's where the real concern surfaced. If Sanders is being judged before the offense around him is stabilized, then the evaluation itself becomes flawed. Not rushed, flawed. Because you're not measuring potential, you're measuring damage control. Some fans believe the front office is at a crossroads. Either commit to building properly, fortify the line, define roles, create real continuity, or risk repeating the same cycle with a different name under center. Because talent doesn't disappear overnight, but it can get buried under dysfunction. And that's why this moment matters more than the scoreboard. It's not just about what happened in one game. It's about what the team chooses to learn from it, and whether they're willing to address the issues that don't show up neatly in a box score. Which brings everything full circle. Because now the debate isn't about whether Sanders struggled. It's about whether he was ever put in a position to truly succeed. By the end of all this, the loudest takeaway isn't anger, it's uncertainty. Because when you zoom out, the situation surrounding Shedeur Sanders doesn't fit neatly into the usual boxes. This isn't a story about a quarterback lighting it up, and it's not a story about one collapsing under pressure either. It's something far more complicated and far more uncomfortable. What fans saw wasn't just missed throws or failed plays. They saw timing that never fully synced, protection that vanished at the worst moments, receivers who didn't consistently show up when pressure closed in, and a narrative that locked onto one name while letting everything else fade into the background. That's why this debate refuses to die. Because if Sanders truly struggled, then the criticism makes sense. But if he was navigating chaos, then the evaluation itself becomes questionable. And once that doubt creeps in, every decision around him, coaching, personnel, development, comes under scrutiny. Football is built on trust. Trust that protection will hold. Trust that roots will break open. Trust that mistakes will be shared, not dumped onto one position. And when that trust fractures, even solid performances can look shaky on paper. The most revealing part of this entire moment isn't the stat line or the clips circulating online. It's how divided the reaction has been. Half the audience sees a quarterback who held his own against elite competition. The other half sees proof he's not ready. And both sides are pulling from the same game. That alone should tell you something. Because true failures are obvious. True success is obvious. But moments like this, moments that split opinion, usually point to deeper issues beneath the surface. And that's the real question this situation leaves behind. Not whether Sanders is the guy. Not whether one lineman missed a block. Not whether one pass should have been caught. But whether this environment is capable of fairly developing and evaluating any quarterback right now. Until that question is answered, the debate won't stop. The clips will keep looping, the blame will keep shifting, and every performance will be filtered through suspicion instead of clarity. And maybe that's the most telling sign of all. Because when the conversation becomes louder than the football itself, something is clearly broken.